Welcome, everyone. I'm Lauren, your host of Ground Your Light. And I am so excited to be here with another beautiful, divine feminine leader, Lisa Damm. And it's a real privilege and an honor to host these incredible women so that they can bring their medicine forward. And I hope that you will really receive deep medicine today because our topics I feel like kind of close to my heart, and I know it is for Lisa. And there's so much going on in the world today that you know um, invokes a quality of grief. So wherever you are in your season of life, if there is a touch point of grief, this is a place for you to stop, pause, and really tend to your grief. And so I want to invite an introduction here. So I'm going to read a little bit about my special guest, Lisa. We met through a mutual friend, and she is local to where I am. We're both from the Midwest, and it's been a pleasure to get to know Lisa. We both connected and kind of zeroed in on one another at a circle, women's circle, and of course, found out that we both. Participate in grief work. So there's that beautiful connection there. So let me introduce Lisa. She is a master Reiki practitioner in the lineage of Dr. Yasui and an angelic practitioner offering an integrative approach to healing and support. Her healing journey began in 2020 when she faced a difficult experience of job loss due to workforce reduction in the design and architecture industry as a result of the economic impact of COVID-19 pandemic. This prompted her to leave Seattle and the beautiful Pacific Northwest, relocating to the Midwest to embark on a new career path in energy healing with her study of Reiki. Also, during this time and after the traumatic loss of her mother, Lisa immersed herself in grief support groups, therapy, and Reiki practice to cope with her physical, mental, and emotional struggles. Lisa believes that by focusing on her own healing first, it allows her to address her own emotional and physical traumas. This personal healing journey allows her to cultivate empathy, resilience, a deeper understanding of the healing process. And now she facilitates grief ceremonies, provides Akashic record readings, and leads Reiki shares at the Institute of Light Center in her hometown of Racine, Wisconsin. Additionally, Lisa is one of the remote healers of the international website. Is it Chi Cafe? Do I have
Cafe, yes.
Okay. Energetic modalities such as Reiki can be done remotely over Zoom. And in her spare time, she enjoys snuggling with her three cats, exploring flea markets and thrift shops, and spending time in her garden. Welcome, Lisa. And I would love for you to just be able to introduce yourself in your own words. And I know we have lots of like topics to cover around grief and healing modalities that are supportive for grief. So welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Thank you so much for having me here and Sacred Living Arts, and then for this beautiful Ground Your Light podcast. I'm so happy to be here. It's an honor. Um, While you were introducing me, my cat was in the background sneezing, and I thought, oh no, he's interfering with the program. So I'm so glad that I threw in that I had three cats. So if they interfere for today's recording, that's one of the things that happens with the animals.
Yep. Yeah, I have a dog
Ah,
nearby, so she comes in
there
and
you
out.
go. But I'm so happy to be here. And the topic of Reiki with grief tending is so dear to my heart.
Mm.
This afternoon, right before I was preparing for this meeting, my next door neighbor let me know that his mom passed away over the weekend.
Mm.
And I just held space with him and let him talk. You know, I thought something was up because there was a lot of neighbors coming on Saturday and Sunday, and I had a feeling that something happened. But this is something as we live and get older, we're going to lose more people that we love that are dear to us, and it's so hard. But I feel that just listening to someone and holding space for them while they share how they're feeling is so important when I'm doing the grief work because there really isn't anything you can say
Mm.
that's going to make someone feel better, but supporting them in your presence is so important. So important. And beautiful things like Reiki and support groups and whatever you can do, resting, sleeping, honoring your body when you need to. Those are so important. So important. So
Yeah. Yeah.
mm,
Mm. Yeah. So, yeah, if you're willing, why don't you share a little bit about how this introduction, like you were kind of just stepping into the world of Reiki when your mother passed away, and how that really supported you. Um, I think, um, you know, sometimes we don't know or understand how that holds space for us too, when, whether it's massage or acupuncture or Reiki. But I would love to explore specifically, like, what is Reiki, and why is Reiki perhaps a very potent um, healing modality, where we can, that we can use for grief tending. So, like, yeah, how did these two things kind of merge for you, where you realized there was this beautiful medicine, that Reiki, carries for grief tending.
sure. So my story is I truly believe that things come and that saying with divine timing. I really could not stress that more than what happened with me with the grief and the Reiki. I literally, I had moved back to the Midwest and I wasn't really sure what I was going to do for work. I knew I wanted to get out of the industry that I was in, and I was exploring different things along the spirituality side, but I heard about Reiki and my good friend Jill was teaching Reiki. I went in for a session. She's like, I'm going to be teaching Reiki 1. So I ended up taking her class, and that was on a Saturday. And then literally the next Wednesday is when I started feeling sick. And I was living with my mom and realized by Saturday that I had COVID. And my mom was started getting sick a few days after me. And one of the things that you do when you do Reiki, any level of Reiki in a class, you do a 21 days of Reiki self-care for yourself afterwards. And I just remember laying in bed going, oh, I'm so sick. Okay, I'm going to try to do this Reiki. There were days that I was asleep and it didn't do Reiki on myself, but it felt like the timing was like, this is so uncanny that I'm doing this Reiki on myself right now and I'm sick. It was very helpful. And then when my mom went to the hospital, I knew about distant Reiki, but I hadn't learned that yet. So I contacted a friend to find out how do you send distant Reiki, and I was doing that, just whatever I could do to feel better that I was helping myself and helping my mom. But I mean, that's literally how close that came together. 5 days after my Reiki 1 class, then I ended up getting sick with COVID. And that's ultimately what took my mom. And it was so traumatic, as all death is traumatic, especially when it's somebody you're really close to. But it was just so hard, and not being able to be there in the hospital with my mom, fighting with the hospital, like trying to get the days right, like when they admitted her, when I could come be with her. It was very traumatic. As we all remembered, everyone, it was just such a political thing. It was
Mhm.
horrible. And what led me to continue with all the Reiki is after my mom passed, my friend from out of state came to stay with me for those first few weeks. She's like, Lisa, you seem like you have PTSD. Like every time the phone would ring, my body would go into this state of fight or flight, which that happens when your loved one's in the hospital. You're waiting for the phone call. She's like, why don't you have some acupuncture done? That you can be treated that way for PTSD, and have some Reiki done for you. You're doing Reiki on yourself, but have Reiki done for you from someone else. So I started doing that. And I noticed the change after just a couple sessions where my body didn't react like it was reliving the trauma that I experienced while it was happening, while my mom was in the hospital. So that was something to me as a Reiki student, a newly Reiki 1 person, witnessing how my body, how my emotions, how everything kind of calmed down by having these regular treatments. So that was a firsthand experience for me on the power of Reiki and acupuncture and these modalities that can really help you with hard times physically and mentally, spiritually.
Mhm.
So, but that was the timing on how I had learned, took the Reiki 1 class, and then how soon after my mom was in the hospital for about 3 weeks before she passed. And, the first year, kind of a blur, very like unreal, disbelief, numb. I
Mhm.
felt that for a really long time. Like, I look back at some photos and talk to my friends who were really supportive, and I don't remember a lot because I think I really
Mhm.
was in this state of shock. I spent a lot of time at home, and I did a lot of self Reiki on myself. I had a lot of treatments from my friends who do Reiki and acupuncture. And then I started attending a Zoom grief group. The hospice through the hospital gave me a number, and I was doing whatever I could to help because I just felt like I was in this deep pit of despair. Like, just, I didn't know if I was going to ever come out of it.
Mhm.
So, so grateful for having that Reiki to just place on my hands on myself, on my body, and just sit there with that. It was very
Mhm.
helpful for me.
Yeah. Um, there's something that always, I don't know, just feels so alive when we talk about grief and keeping grief warm or moving. And I do think it's a common phenomena is that when we go through something traumatic or we go through grief, it can be a place where we get stuck energetically. And it's hard to move out of that if we're not keeping the grief warm. And, what I mean by that is really integrating, processing, moving the grief from the subtle layers kind of the anatomy that then kind of shift things on the external, the more physical. So we have these symptoms that show up in our physical experience, um, but we can support, the symptoms in a sense of grief by working on the body energetically, which is, I think, why Reiki seems to be such a beautiful way of holding grief because it's realigning the energetics in a sense. It's allowing things to start to move and flow in the body again so that we can start to process our grief more. Um, it's not like we're doing it to get to an end point even because unfortunately with grief, as you know, like there's not an end point. It's something sometimes that we carry forever. The loss of a parent, we carry that forever. So it's about learning how to manage our grief. And I just love the idea of also that Reiki is a place where we can get quiet and be held because oftentimes when people try to support us in grief with their words, it can actually just be a little more traumatizing. It's not, people don't always use the words that we need to hear. And, as a culture, that's just something we're working on, and no one can ever necessarily get it right. So,
I
yeah,
agree.
yeah.
Absolutely. You made some really good points about grief and the crossover with Reiki because I feel that our society has a really hard time with grief, like especially because of not knowing what to say. You might say the wrong thing. So it's easier to not say anything at all, or you end up not calling your friend or texting them because you feel like you might be interrupting them. You might say something that makes them feel worse.
Mhm.
Our society just has a really hard time with grief.
Yeah.
I feel that for something that happens to each and every one of us that's alive, we really have a hard time with it. We don't have structure around it that people had in the past so much. There's a funeral and then afterwards, that's it, kind of a thing. So it's really tough.
Yeah.
But when you mentioned that the Reiki and then the feeling the grief, the common denominator there is one of the things that people have a tendency to do with the grief is you don't want to feel something that's so intense. You feel like you're not going to survive that when it's that intense. So a very normal tendency is to push it down, to try to stay really busy so that you don't feel that pain.
Yeah.
And that's a normal tendency, a human tendency to do.
Right.
Um, but it really is not healthy from an energetic, from a physical standpoint. As I was learning more and more about Reiki, that's one of the things that Reiki does. It's opens up the blocks, it pushes through the blocks in your body. Those are the things that cause later disease when you don't tend to the emotional, mental, and spiritual things. Those actually build up in your body and will physically cause you to get ill. So that's
Mhm.
why a beautiful calming modality like Reiki can help with the grief. It's subtle and it's gentle. So I feel that when you combine that with feeling the horror, the really sad, horrible feelings of grief while adding Reiki to that, it helps you process it and it helps move those blocks through your body energetically.
Mm. Yeah.
So
Yeah. I know it's like our issues are held in our tissues. And so, like you said, really, if we don't tend to, our emotional states, and really cleanse and purify these on a regular basis as they come up, if we avoid them or just like, I think sometimes it's just busyness too, like, oh, I don't have time. And it is kind of a phenomenon too that there's a lot of busyness when a loss occurs, especially a death, because there can be a lot of, like, even legal things to kind of work through. I remember when my grandmother passed away, there was so many details for my mom to get organized around the funeral, and making so many decisions, and even clearing out her stuff. I think it kept her busy. Like, she wanted to, like, sift through her stuff and get rid of it right away. And I think it was a distraction for her, because years later, like, she's just starting to kind of really grieve, to do the real grieving. And if we don't feel it, we can't heal it. And I feel um, like, I don't know, what's your take on sort of this cyclical or spiraling energy around healing? Because, as I mentioned, grief from our Western medical model, um, you're given a timeline to deal with your grief, and if you don't deal with it, and I think it's like almost less than a year, the mainstream medical system will start to diagnose you with a mental health disorder. And so, looking at tending grief from a more holistic perspective, there is no timeline for healing and grief. Um, and so I think through our grief ceremonies, grief tending, um, can honor that process. And it is different for everyone. And I think that's also why it can be difficult to know what to do when someone is in a state of grieving, because each person is different and they're going to receive words differently. And so it's hard to say, this is what you do. But I
Right,
think
right.
as we become more sensitive and we become more um, educated and experienced and really, like, diving into grief and accepting grief as a normal process of our human experience, we'll fine tune that a little bit.
Right. I hope so because
Yeah.
um well, what I noticed right after my mom's death, I had mentioned that I was really kind of in a numbed state of shock. I think it was because I stayed so busy dealing with the estate and dealing with the household, not really sure what was going to happen. I'm living in my parents' home now, and I remember friends saying things like, "Oh, that's not a healthy place for you to be after so much loss. It's just going to remind you of the loss." And it was interesting because I looked at it, I could see their point, but then there was also the point of, oh my gosh, I feel my closest to my mom, and I feel safe here in her home with her things. And I know that what may feel like a curse right now will be such a blessing later, because all the good memories are what's going to help her stay alive in my memories. So there's a catch 22 with that. So I understood what my friends meant by that.
Mhm.
However, um, I think that for me personally, and I know every single person is different with grief, because every person's relationship with the person who passed is different. So you could have two sisters, and one is really struggling. The other one seems like they're doing okay. There's no right or wrong way to grieve, because everyone had a different relationship with the person who passed. But for me personally, the first year was a blur and very numbing. The second year, that was when I really felt everything. And I felt I had a lot of physical problems pop up in my body. This was something that I learned too later with Reiki and energetic healing. but all of a sudden I had a pain in my right hand wrist, and I'm like, this is so weird. Is it carpal tunnel? I don't know. I don't use a keyboard often. And that was about 8 months after my mom had passed. And then 2 months later, the same place on my left wrist, exact place, same pain. It was debilitating. I had Reiki every day, acupuncture, massage therapist. I went to my doctor. She didn't know. She sent me to a wrist specialist. He suggested cortisone shots and maybe surgery. I had all the blood work done. I thought maybe I have RA, and no, I didn't have that. So I just wore braces. And for that second year, I couldn't do anything. I sat in a chair, cried, Reiki'd, meditated. I was worried because I thought, oh my gosh, this might be forever. I don't know. Until you can't use your hands anymore, you realize how much you need your hands. But I just kept going to different grief groups, and one of the books that the in-person grief group that I went to, it talked about physical pain coming out of your body from severe grief. And I thought to myself, wow, I bet this is what's going on. And probably like 6 months later, gone from both wrists. To this day, not a single pain in my hands or my wrist. And then I remember, and I'm reading everything I can on spirituality, healing, grief. And I found a Louise Hay book, and she mentioned that in your body, the wrists and your hands relates to grief. I couldn't believe that. I was just like, what? So so the second
Mm.
year was really, really tough for me. I was, you know, unsure about what was happening with my body. I had I was really feeling the pain, whereas the first year I was kind of numb because I was staying busy with the estate.
Mhm.
So I tried to be as loving to myself as possible. I just lost my mom, and we were very close. We were best friends and, mother daughter.
Mhm.
So I just said to myself, it's okay, Lisa, if you're not out working and doing all this crazy stuff, just take care of the house, take care of the cats, take care of yourself. So I just did Reiki for
Mm.
that whole second year. And that's kind of led to me to where I'm at today,
Wow.
almost a year later. So,
Mm.
but everyone is different. Everyone's body responds differently to
Mhm.
grief. Everyone's experience is different. That's why, to me, it's just kind of ludicrous where you might be working a job and they give you like 3 to 5 days off. And then you're supposed to go back to normal and be normal. If all of a sudden you're not performing
Mhm.
correctly, or it's not fair, because
Wow.
a lot of times grief causes cloudiness and your memory is not the same. You can't remember things, and it's really a tough time for your body and your mind, all of it,
Yeah.
mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual.
Yeah. And the whole piece on time is so strange too, that we're allotted to deal with our grief. You might have some time off of work, and it gives you the time to do all the busy work that's surrounds the loss. But oftentimes, it's once things get quiet that then it really hits you. And by that point, you're expected to perform again. But you're, like you said, you're still having the impact of the grief. And I just want to share like my story because it just confirms your experience, and I know I share this with you, but through a different lens of loss. So through my experience with divorce, I don't know what the exact time frame was, but it was probably like within 3 to 6 months, 6 months probably. After I had been moving a lot. I had to leave my home, and of course, as a mother, I wanted like home for my kids, and so I had moved multiple times within a year, and all of a sudden, I was just stopped dead in my tracks with a nerve issue that went from my neck. I couldn't lay down. I couldn't sit up without excruciating pain. I had a literally an entire month I could not work. And the only thing that helped, I couldn't even get massage, just like it hurt too much and I couldn't lay down. The only thing that helped were two things. One, I did find a practitioner who did like zero balancing. It was a super, and actually she used that in combination with neurovascular therapy, and she was so attentive and mindful of where my body was comfortable on her table, and we just worked so gently, and that was sort of the thing that kind of started the healing process of the physical um, pain. And then I also started doing self Reiki, and that was the most healing thing I could do. And we both, know Alan Wolfelt, who has these touchstones of grief tending, and self care is one of the main touchstones to tending grief. And we just really need to grace ourselves with time to take hot baths, take solitude walks, to receive modalities that are supportive. We talked about maybe some different ones: acupuncture, Reiki, there's sound healing, there's tuning forks. I don't know, what are some other ones that are
Cranial
possibilities?
sacral, cranial
Yes.
sacral work. I had my friend give me sessions of there. I mean, it was whatever you can do to really slow down and pay attention to your body, to your spirit, and really just give it the time and the energy that you can. I recommend doing that. It's the best thing you can do for that time period, that acceptance. Um, they say that that's the last key to healing grief, but I don't believe that. You might get to acceptance, but then you revert back to like disbelief again. I still do that. You
Mhm.
know, my mom's 3-year anniversary is coming up in January, and there's still moments of disbelief that
Mhm.
she's gone. So that's the thing. When you're in this grief time, doing these things that can help you heal is so important to take that time for yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And I like it, what you're describing is that sort of spiraling nature of healing where you feel like you've addressed an issue and you're aware of it, and then you've been able to let it go. And sometimes there's just things, triggers in life that will bring up, sometimes just completely out of the blue and to your surprise, an emotional response through a memory, or sometimes even like a smell can invoke memory that brings up, maybe so many emotional pieces that all of a sudden you feel like you're in this cycle of grief again. And maybe it's not as challenging as it was a year before, but I feel like this is how we carry that grief. And they say that those who are grieving are closest to God. And there's this quality of grieving that is completely holy in our human experience. And I say that because um, it's a way that we can meet our grief with a quality that's like real honoring. Like through the witnessing of what we are experiencing, as you said, taking that time and like noticing, oh, I'm feeling this and I'm noticing where it is in my body. Hello. I see you, I hear you, I acknowledge you. And we can also reflect and contemplate, how has this been serving us? Because it is a way in which the body protects and cares for us. But it also needs to move. We're not going to, it also needs to move and transmute and change, so that we can use our grief to grow and expand. And I think that's an invitation that grief offers us. It can take us into like the lowest of lows and into the dark night of the soul. But it's from there that we can rise and expand through new perspective, even. I think that carrying a torch because you have been a grief holder is, it carries a lot of wisdom. And so when you've really truly tended the grief, there's this sacred, like, torch of wisdom that you carry, that you can maybe share. And we talked about reinvestment, and how one way that we can tend to our grief is by supporting others, kind of reinvesting our own experience and putting that towards others, so that we can support them. I don't know if you want to speak to that at all.
Sure, absolutely. Um, I love that you brought that up about grief being a sacred thing for us. I remember hearing, and this was just weeks after my mom dying, someone saying that it was a grief can is a gift. And I wasn't sure, I had to really ponder that and think about that. Um, and then I realized over time, as I was grief tending and doing these things for myself, that wow, one thing that has done for me, it really opened my heart to compassion for other people that I didn't have before. And then I started understanding why grief can be a gift for others, because I would just find out. And I am a very emotional person. I cry very easily. I'm what they say, I'm an empath. I can feel people's emotions very easily. I mean, someone like when my neighbor was telling me about his mother this afternoon, I came in the house and I was crying for him. I was sending, I did a prayer and did a little Reiki for him. I feel that, but I think that's a beautiful thing when you have compassion for other people. And that, as I was doing more Reiki and learning more, that was the only time I felt any kind of peace or goodness. Those little glimpses of joy. It took maybe after the second year, I started feeling a little glimpse. I saw a little bit was when I felt that I could support somebody who was having a hard time. That it was really uncanny. It was just like divine timing about how I found the Reiki. That first year, right after my mom passed, I kept getting Reiki clients whose mothers had passed. And I thought, wow, this is not an accident. And it was so beautiful to be able to be on the other side, to just hold space for people, to share in that sacred space, allow them to release, just listen to them. One of the things that really helped me a lot and still does is just letting someone know that you're thinking about them. Just a text, hey, how are you doing? I'm just thinking about you. Um, it can take away the awkward edge that you might say something wrong to someone who's grieving. If you just let somebody know that you're there and you're thinking of them, I have one friend that did that, still does. Just text me today. How
Oh.
are you doing? How's it
Mhm.
going? Maybe we should get together. Another thing that really helped me when my aunt, my mom's sister, will talk about my mom. Oh, it means a lot to me when I can talk about my mom and say her name. If someone asks me or even comments on my post and says, "We love Betty," that was my mom. That made me feel so good. I know with a lot of grief, people don't talk about their past loved ones anymore. And for me personally, it really helped me to say her name and to be able to have a conversation about her with my friends. So I try to remember that for my people who lost someone, and tell me your favorite memory of them.
Mm.
Do you have a picture of them that you really love? Like, I'll do that now because those were the things that really brought me comfort in my dark moments.
Mm.
So, these things with grief, it brought me a compassion that I didn't have before. I didn't even know I was missing it before, but I was also that person was, oh, I don't know what to say. So maybe I didn't really reach out the way I could have. I wasn't really there for someone who had lost a loved one because I was feeling awkward. But I think if you just let people know that you are thinking about them and that you love them,
Yeah.
it that compassion, grief is a gift.
Mm.
It helps you become more compassionate to other people that are experiencing the loss and the pain and the despair that you felt.
Mm. Yeah. And it reminds me that, and I think it's another touchstone, is understanding that even though there's a physical loss of a person, what what really is healing is to acknowledge that there's this possibility of a different and new relationship. It's not that the relationship has to end, but it becomes different. It evolves to something new and it can be really wonderful. And so, we think of connecting to our loved ones, um, through this way, through the spiritual realms, by honoring them with like a picture, creating an altar. So maybe we could talk a little bit about ritual and ceremony and how we keep this grief, as a transformative and honoring way. What do you do, in your grief circles? How do you help people, um, you know, kind of process in this beautiful way of ceremony and ritual?
Well, I've only done one grief ceremony at the Institute of Light, but I have another one coming up Monday, December 2nd. I figured it would be an ideal time right before the holidays because holidays are a time where you're really, really feeling the absence of your loved one because a lot of times people get together with their families and there's tradition and they're no longer there. But what I do and what's helped me is I am all about the altars. I have altars throughout my house, sacred items that I kind of group together with crystals, and I have pictures of my mom in different rooms, and it I know this sounds silly, but for me, it brings me so much comfort. Every day I have this little dragonfly light lamp that's right over her picture. I turn it on first thing in the morning and I turn it off at the right before I go to bed. And it's something that I do that that just brings me comfort. And at Christmas time, one of the couple of my best gifts, one of my mom's cousins and a girlfriend, they both gave me an ornament with my mom's picture in it. And I had that on the tree. I had a couple with my father's picture. I had some angel ornaments. And for me, being able to look at that during the holidays brought me some peace. It brought me a little comfort. In the summertime, the garden, I spent a lot of time planting her favorite flowers. She loved ferns and bleeding hearts. So what did I do? I went out and got some ferns and bleeding hearts and had those all, those things make a difference in your grief tending journey. It really does.
Mhm.
It it's a way to remember your loved one. I talk to my mom. I swear people think I'm crazy because I'll have conversations because I feel my mom's presence around me all the time. I'm in her home. I'm taking care of her cat. But I talked to her and I'm like, "Do you like your flowers? Look at they came up this year. They're so beautiful." And those things really help. So I try to honor each and every one who attend the grief ceremony. I try to the last one I did, I had a rock for everyone and I had markers and stickers, and I had everyone decorate a rock.
Mhm.
So you could place it in your garden or on your altar for your loved one. And those little things that we take away and can use to honor our loved one in a ritual or a ceremony, I think are so important to us. We're in physical form in physical bodies, and things do matter because we're in this form. So using those little items to remember our loved ones, they do help and
Mm.
they're important. So I
Yeah.
always try to bring that element into my events. So someone can leave with something for their loved one. They'll remember their loved one.
Oh, that's so beautiful. So beautiful. Hmm. Yeah, in 2020, when I moved into my home, um, it was really sweet. I bought the home from the the children of the mother and father that built the house, and their four children grew up, in this home their whole life. They still had the red shag carpet, like when I moved in from like 73. Like, so it was so cool. And one day, one of the children stopped by. I mean, of course, she's an adult, like she has her grown children of her own. And she asked, well, she brought me pictures of the house because her mother just adored this house, and it was a shrine, honestly. And it's no coincidence that I was attracted to the house. Um, and she asked, she's like, "Do you mind if I take some of the lily of the valley from the backyard to put in my yard, just as a memory of her mother?" And I'm like, "Please take as much as you want." I was like, "Yes." And so that was another example, of just honoring and keeping the memory and that relationship alive. And so this can be such a beautiful thing. I have a couple altars myself that have like my grandmother's, um, that just remind me of them. I bought gardenia perfume when I was in Egypt because my grandmother had gardenia bushes on either side of her door out in Southern California. And I still remember the smell. And every occasion, I'll be on a walk or just randomly I'll get this whiff of gardenia. And it's like, "Oh, hi, Grandma." Like, I know she's there. Like, it's like so interesting the way we're connected to the spiritual world. And that can really be supportive, when we want to stay connected with a loved one.
I love that. I'm so happy you brought that up and you said, "Hello, Grandma." You knew that she was there.
Yeah.
That's the other thing, is being aware of those signs that
Mhm.
you pick up and you take that, your loved one is there. Cardinals or you find coins, and I know that and unless you're experiencing this, some people how that happens to everyone. No, you just know when it happens. I was wearing, my mom had, she loved her fine jewelry. She used to sell fine jewelry, and I had these little diamond earrings of hers, and I wore them, and this is shortly after she died, and I went out and I couldn't find the earring. One of the earrings fell out, and I was so upset. I swore I wouldn't wear anything else of hers that would fall off and I could lose. And I looked everywhere in the house, in the car. I went back to my friend's house, looked there, couldn't find it. And the next day, I went out to the car, and there by the gas pedal was the earring and a white feather right next to the earring.
Wow.
I took a picture of that. I have that in my phone. Whenever I really am missing my mom, I look at that picture. I know without a doubt in my mind that was my mom saying, "Here's the earring with the white feather." Where did that come from? And I looked in the car.
Yeah.
I searched the car,
Yeah.
and there it was,
I
as
love it.
plain as day.
And she's like, I still got your back.
I still got your back. So,
Oh, that's
but
so
those
sweet.
those are so important and those
Oh
are
my
so
gosh. Yeah.
beautiful, and I
Mhm.
know that when you first lose someone, the grief is so intense that you might be missing all these
Mhm.
little signals that your loved ones letting you know that they're right there with you. I hear that a lot of times, talking to people that just lost someone. I'm not having a visitation dream, or I'm not picking up on these signs, but from everything I've learned about grief and our loved ones contacting us, when you're in this deep grief, you're at the really low place, this vibrationally low place. And it's hard to notice something, it's hard for them to even, let us know. It's usually when you're not in a deeply grieved place and you're just like all of a sudden, ooh, you smell something and right there, and you're thinking of them.
Mhm.
So grateful for those
Yeah.
opportunities to have and just know that they're around us
Yeah.
always.
Yeah. That makes me kind of like cycle back to Reiki because like if our base chakra is not, you know, like really supporting us, if it's blocked, and I kind of hate to use the word block because I don't really think that that's how the system works, but it's not vibrating. We're not like vibrating at the right frequency that base chakra should be, and that's where we feel safe,
Hmm.
and supported. And so I think when we're in that grief state, we don't feel safe. We're rocked off of our foundation. And so it's hard to miss those things that we usually kind of probably associate with the higher chakras. So it seems like Reiki, in its ability to balance and harmonize the chakras, would be really supportive to help us get out of that survival mode and just relax us enough so that we can receive some of these beautiful things that can occur, to make us feel better in a time that's really challenging. And that also um, sort of brings up a subject that I wanted to bring forward around grief and how it can reconnect us back to the cycles of nature, of life, death, and rebirth, and to really understand and accept and embody this as part of our human experience on not only like a day-to-day basis, as if when the sun rises and sets, um, but it's just part of the nature of life. And I think when we understand that as part of our human experience, that's where we begin to honor and maybe even process grief in a healthier way. And that brings us back to tradition, loss of tradition, loss of the rituals, the ceremony. How do we come together as a community? And I think like for us in the Western culture, like we know that there's funerals and those can look very different. Um, but I think there's this remembering and also a sort of a reconstruction of honoring grief. How do we do this as a human species in a way that that really brings people together. They used to wear the armbands so that it was well known by the community that you were in a grieving state. Like that wasn't a normal, um, way that people navigated grief in communities. In the Irish culture, there was something called keening, where they actually hired women for, like, I think it was like a 24-hour period where they would grieve and moan and cry. They used their voices to heal the collective energy around someone that had passed. It was a normal mourning process for the community to have these women wail and sing, and as a way of grieving, not only for and actually, like, I think there's also a layer of midwifing the soul, so that the soul is sort of supported in its transition from this life to, I don't know, infinite consciousness or whatever happens to us.
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
that's very beautiful. I'm glad you brought that up because it's so true. I mean, you think about the loss of who's passed on, you think about there's so many different losses. They call them secondary losses that affect your stability. If you lost a husband, there's an income
Mhm.
that you've lost, and you don't feel stable, and you don't know how you're going to make ends meet. I had just moved back to Wisconsin. I wasn't sure what I
Mhm.
was going to do. I was living in my mom's house. I was helping her with projects, figuring that out. And then my mom dies. I didn't know how I was going to afford living here. I didn't know. I mean, that first year was very ungrounding. I felt that. I remember when my friend was helping me with the acupuncture, she made a comment. She's like, "You should wear red underwear. You feel not grounded." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I did that." I was like, "I'm gonna get some red underwear." It's like whatever I could do to ground myself.
Mhm.
So I wasn't living in fear because I felt a financial fear of what was going on. But that's so true. And I wish we had more support that like these traditions had, group support, um, so that you're not alone in this process. I remember everything I could read on death and what happens in different traditions. I read a book called The Tibetan Book of the Dead and the Living, and I was reading about what Buddhists did after someone passed, where the whole village got together and was there while the person was in the process of dying, and then after it was so beautiful, that there was that kind of support for people who are losing their loved ones.
Mhm.
My neither of my parents wanted a funeral. My mom was very, very adamant about that, but I knew that she was okay with a celebration of life party.
Mhm.
So I had people over in her home. We played her favorite music and had her favorite foods and drink. And that was really helpful for me, right about a month after she passed.
Mhm.
So that was great.
Mhm.
But, I think that we're at a point where we can create our own
Mhm.
traditions now, since there seems to be, I think people are getting away from a lot of the American tradition of just funeral and then burial. I think that you can create your own now with what sits right for you, and maybe you had a conversation with your loved one what they wanted, and hopefully you get the support. I say to my friends, do you want to come and talk to me? Let's just talk about my mom and watch some videos. I have videos of my family, and that's so comforting. And
Mhm.
some people, might not want to do that, but for me that worked,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that helped. So you sometimes, if you need something, you as the grieving person too should speak up and just say, I love you, I need this. I need to talk about
Mm,
my mom today. I'm having a hard time. I have not had anyone say no. I've had a lot of
mm,
support that way. I've been very lucky, but sometimes you just speak up with what you need, and hopefully you have someone there that can support you. If not, grief groups was really helpful.
mhm,
I therapist that was helpful.
mhm.
Um, I did all the things that I could
Yeah.
do to help. So,
Hmm. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa, for sharing so much. Is there anything else that you want to share, bring up? Lisa and I decided we were going to do a little Reiki healing. And so I was thinking maybe we would just kind of wrap up the sort of more formal, not that this is a formal conversation, but like just the talk. And then we would go into our healing and then just kind of leave it at that. So I'd love for you to just, I don't know, wrap up in whatever way. If there's something else that you wanted to touch in on, and maybe even, just share, where people can find you, what's coming up in your world. Um, yeah.
yeah. Well, um, you can find me in Racine, my hometown. Jill and I have the Institute of Light, and it's at 712 Grove Avenue. I do a Reiki share once a month. It's a beautiful place to exchange Reiki, have Reiki done on you. If you have taken Reiki 1 on any level, you can share Reiki onto other people. We don't just close it off to just Reiki students. If someone has never experienced Reiki, that's a good time for someone to come in and have a little Reiki done on them to see if they want to go forward and have a Reiki session. So I do that once a month. The next one will be Saturday, November 9th. We also do Reiki circles once a month. It's like a Reiki ceremony. It's really beautiful, and everyone can participate and have some of that feeling of the Reiki energy. It's just a very beautiful way to start your day. And then I will be doing a grief ceremony December 2nd at the Institute of Light. I'm in the process of working on my home studio so that I can do Zoom Reiki sessions, which is some of my best feedback on a Reiki session was a remote session. So that way I'll be able to do sessions with people around the world and throughout the country. I have friends everywhere in the US, which is nice to be able to offer these services. And yes, just reach out. And if you've never had Reiki, try to find someone, a Reiki share, or I highly recommend always try something. And I always say, based on your experience, if you feel the value of that. But for me, Reiki is such a beautiful, gentle healing modality. I've mentioned it's salve for the soul. It's
Mhm.
it's a very gentle, beautiful way of holding yourself while you're in the grief process. So
Mm.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, and I assume that any of our audience is already going to know what Reiki is, but maybe just like sum up with like a little bit of like what is Reiki for anyone that is new and would like to experience it.
Sure. I always say Reiki is a energetic healing technique or modality that you use when you come to a session. I say just wear very comfortable clothing. You'll lay down on a massage table, and sometimes I'll touch you, but most of the time through the session, I'll have my hands above your body, and I'm working and placing a Reiki light. This is a beautiful universal Reiki light through your body. I will be called to place it in different parts of your body where I feel it needs the Reiki. And it is just a beautiful session. Some people fall asleep, some people remove and release emotions and cry. It's different for every person, every session, but it's just a beautiful way of moving the Reiki light through your body, through each of the energetic centers of your body, each of the chakras. And it's beautiful. I recommend everyone experiencing Reiki.
Hmm. Yeah, and I personally think it is a like I just feel like it's a foundational 101 like skill set in a sense. It's not really a skill set, but like something that everyone should be attuned to do self-healing. Like we're really like designed for self-healing and we can support ourselves. So even if you don't feel comfortable like doing that for someone else, like just to be able to be empowered in your own healing process, I think is really important nowadays because we tend to hand over authority to a lot of other external forces to provide healing for us when really we can do so much on our own. And I think that that's a place of kind of reprogramming that we need to kind of invite ourselves into. And so Reiki is a great entryway to learn this process where you can provide that for yourself, and that's a beautiful gift. Yeah.
Absolutely. I always say to people, if you enjoyed the Reiki session and you feel this is going to be helpful for you, I always recommend taking a Reiki 1 class so that you can at least practice self Reiki every day. You can do Reiki on your cats and dogs, your pets. I mean, that is something that is so beneficial for your full health, your full wellness, your whole being, your mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical well-being. If everyone in the world did knew Reiki and did Reiki 1 on themselves, the whole world would change, I believe.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. Um, okay. So I think I'm gonna just pull. What do you think? Do you like to have music, Lisa, when you're offering Reiki?
Do. I like to
Okay.
have something in the background that's
Yeah. Okay.
soft and beautiful.
Okay. Yeah. Let me pull something up. Now, we didn't really have this plan before we recorded today. Um, and so just give us a second to transition. I'll try to find something here quick. Um, I know there's a playlist that might be good for us. Mm, okay, I think this would be good. Um, all right, before I play the music, I'm going to just kind of gently guide us into our inner space. And I'm going to invite the medicine of the rose into this healing process. And then Lisa's going to do her beautiful Reiki healing. And we'll also just, you'll sit back in silence too and just receive. And
I add one thing?
yeah, yeah.
One thing I'm going to add, if you're listening to this and you feel called, and I do this a lot with my clients, place your hands over your heart. We're
Mhm.
talking about grief right now. So while you listen to this, go ahead and place your hands over your heart.
Yeah. Well, I was going to just invite people to kind of like get into their body a little bit. So I do what's called embodied grief, and working with the Taoist five element philosophy, there are elements that we hold in our body, and the element of metal is connected to grief and also the organ of the lungs. So we can tend to hold grief in our lungs, and when we're overproducing metal because of our grief process or experience, we can really feel a lot of sadness. And what that does is it actually shuts down our courage. And so that's okay for a while, right? Like when we're experiencing grief, there's this quality of release and reflection. So all of these pieces kind of will come together as I guide you, and then and then I'll invite you to place your hands over your heart. Yeah. Okay. So you'll be invited to either lie down or sit in a comfortable position. And I'm going to have you gently bring your awareness to your breath and just take a few breaths that are a little bit deeper, a little more intentional. Breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. And allow the awareness of your breath to guide you into your inner sanctuary so that you can really feel into your body. As we work with grief, it's multidimensional, so we're really paying attention to all aspects of our being, our mental body, our physical body, our emotional body, our energetic body, our spiritual body. And so as you're lying or sitting there, I'm going to have you place your hands at sort of the outer edge of your chest, just below the collarbone, before the shoulder joint. And you can either press in here and create some circles to activate the sort of acupressure point that stimulates the metal element meridian in the body. The meridian is an energy highway. And this invites us to deepen into our awareness of grief. It draws the energy into our lungs to start to clear and deepen our awareness of our grief. So feel to make circles, or you can even begin to tap on that area. And you can even tap towards the sternum, towards the center of the chest, and maybe downwards. And just really feel into that upper torso of your body where the lungs are held and carried, protected by the rib cage. And take a couple more deep breaths. Really feel into the fullness of your lungs, the front, the back, the sides, the top and the bottom, both lobes of the lungs, the right lobe, the left lobe, breathing equally into both sides of the lungs, or even noticing if maybe one lung receives more air than the other, noticing any imbalances there. And then we'll just soften down. Let the breath just come in and flow naturally. And we're going to bring our eye gaze just below the nostrils. So you just feel into any areas of grief that your body might be holding in this moment. And grief can express itself in many ways. You might be in a state of anger or frustration or impatience, detachment, sadness, depression, loneliness. Notice what your experience is at this moment. And feel that in your body. Notice where this feeling kind of rests or resides. It might not be in the lungs. Maybe you feel it, below the rib cage or in the womb or in a leg. It doesn't really matter. In the neck. Where do you feel this emotion of grief settling in the body? And just hold your awareness there gently, receiving that experience like a guest. And you can welcome this guest. Welcome, I see you. I feel you. I honor you. I thank you. And if you're ready, you might even say, and I release you. Just holding your attention there in this beautiful holy body vessel. Maybe exploring this experience of grief as it shows itself to you, maybe as a color, maybe as an image, maybe it has a texture, maybe it has a sound. And feel free to place your palms over your heart. Feel the warmth of your hands, allowing you to just connect into your own body, your own experience with a quality of softening and opening. A safeness in receiving yourself. And then I'm going to invite you to use your inner vision to imagine a beautiful velvety white rose enter into your body from the crown, moving that rose down into the seat of your lungs and your heart. Allow this rose to unfurl its petals in your body, releasing its beautiful fragrance, its softness, inviting you to meet your grief with a quality of delicateness. Just like you're holding a rose, you don't grasp tightly, you hold it softly. And allow the essence of the rose to sort of begin to release as this rose starts to spin the center of your body, your lungs, your heart. And as this rose spins and unfurls its petals, it creates this beautiful salve for your soul to begin to heal, to begin to soften the intensity of grief, which might be painful, which might be scary, which might be gutting. Allow the rose to even invite tears, purifying and cleansing tears. There's nothing you have to do but just receive this beautiful medicine from the rose, this beautiful balm, to know and trust that grief is part of the cycle and the beauty of our lives. The life of a rose, too, has endings and beginnings. It experiences challenges in life represented in its thorns, which protect its delicate, fragile petals. Allow your awareness and this rose to kind of just settle into the back of your body as you begin to receive this beautiful white divine light of Reiki and rose medicine. Okay. So, yeah, feel free to just kind of bask in that energy. And Lisa, if there's anything you'd like to say to help others receiving to kind of transition, what do you recommend? How do they get kind of back into their body? Um, yeah.
Thank you. That was so beautiful. Just so tingly right now and warm. I suggest this: be loving to yourself, be kind to yourself, speak well to yourself. If you're tired, close your eyes and pause, take a nap, do all the things you would do for the loved one that passed or you're grieving. Do it to yourself. Give that same love to yourself during this time period for you while you're grieving. Do beautiful practices. Slow down. Feel your body. Get into your body. Ground yourself. Walk barefoot on the ground if you can. It's not too cold. Just be very gentle with yourself during this time. And if you haven't tried any of these modalities, reach out to someone. Find someone in your area that provides these and try it. See how it feels for you.
Mm, yeah. I think I'll just add kind of the code because it's a little bit of a deconditioning and a reprogramming that many of us women, especially, need to kind of acknowledge as part of our way of operating that is self depleting. Is that I allow myself to be exactly as I am. I allow myself to be exactly as I am. I allow myself to be exactly as I am. And I open to receive because of the love that I am. And so, for those of you on your, if you are on the journey deep in the grief portal, we both, Lisa and I, send you so much love, and we will hold hope for you in these challenging times. And we just send you so much love. Thank you, Lisa, so much for sharing
Thank
your
you.
story and being authentic and vulnerable and using your experience to help and support others in theirs. Yeah.
Thank you, Lauren.
Yeah. All right. You take care. Thanks, Lisa.